So
This
this
conference
is just,
will now be recorded.
oh, there we go. Thank you for that. This is just our introductory slide. That was the welcome. We'll go over the GoToMeeting stuff in a minute, and then the prize drawings. We're going to have a roll call for anybody who is on the phone, myself, and then Suzi's presentations, and then we'll get names again, have a Q&A session, and then we will do what everyone is excited about, the door prize drawings at the end. So please make sure you're on mute until the Q&A at the end. If you're on GoToMeeting, I'm trying to look through to see if anyone is on the phone that isn't listed as a caller, which is very difficult right now. If you're on the phone, please press *6 on your number pad. That will mute and unmute you. The nice lady on GoToMeeting will tell you either which way. If you're not on mute during this, we will probably mute you respectfully. There's a smiley face there for those that can see it, just so that there's no background noise during these presentations. As both of the presentations, mine and Suzi's, go on, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Those will be the questions that we'll get to first at the start of the Q&A at the end of this. And I think I actually had a slide still about questions in mind, so maybe I'll have to address that. But you can always unmute during the Q&A as well and ask any questions. Obviously, please be respectful to any of the presenters or anybody asking questions during these presentations. As far as the prize drawings are concerned, for each virtual session that you attend, your participation of which this session is one, you will be entered for an opportunity to win one of many wonderful prizes. I actually don't, no, I do know what Suzi has. So yeah, great prizes. The drawings will be at the end of these sessions. You must be present to win a door prize. As far as the grand prize is concerned, that will be part of the Earth Day event, which will be on the 22nd. You do not need to be present to win a grand prize or the grand prize during the Earth Day event on the 22nd. And for each of these sessions that you attend leading up to Earth Day, you will get one entry for each session. So, sorry, I'm going between phone and computer just to make sure we're not missing any names. And I don't know if Jess, if you see
Andrew,
anyone that is.
Andrew, I can cover this part.
Sure.
If you'd like. Okay. So right now we are doing a roll call. We will need your contact information if you'd like to be entered into the prize drawings. So right now I only have one phone caller, but the phone caller, since I don't know who you are, if you would like to be entered, please unmute yourself and let me know your name so that I can record your information. If you're not comfortable giving me your contact information right now, you can always email it to one of the people listed below. Well, sorry, you can't see that. So you can either email it to me at environmental@badriver-nsn. But if you could unmute yourself right now, that would be helpful just to let me know who you are.
Hi, this is Annie Rosen and Jay McPhee. We're on the same phone. We're on the road. We're coming home. And we don't need to be entered into your contest. We're just listening to learn.
Okay, thank you, Annie and Jay.
Okay.
Thank you. And then for anybody else that is logged in on their computer, if you would like to be entered into the prize drawings, if you could please post your contact information to the organizers of the event. It's one of the options for the chat. So instead of sending to everyone, you can choose send to organizers, and I'll get your contact information that way in order to ensure that you get entered into both the door prize drawing drawn at the end of the session and the grand prize drawing drawn on Earth Day. Thank you. We'll have another roll call right before the Q&A later on too.
All righty, wonderful. Thanks, Jess. All right, so thank you again to everybody that is logged on here listening. I'm Andrew Spychalla, the Brownfield specialist here at Bad River. I'm talking to you today about the program. What is a brownfield, if you've never heard of it? How many do we have and where are they? What are any concerns we have surrounding them? And where is the focus of this program going forward? So just a little background. If this is the first time you're hearing about a brownfield, what is it? Well, the US EPA defines a brownfield as a real owned property that is abandoned, idle, or underused, and the redevelopment of that property is complicated by the presence or potential presence of contamination. Examples that are commonly found could be from oil spills, leaking underground storage tanks, or improperly closed landfills. As far as determining what is a brownfield, or if something is classified as a brownfield, we follow what's called the redevelopment roadmap. And I apologize to Annie and Jay who can't see any of this, but hopefully you can follow along on the road there. So the first step as far as classifying a site as a brownfield is to basically just assess the site. When assessing a site, all the background information needs to be gathered. So this is the history of the site, any photographs that have been taken in the past, or aerial photographs, and any first-hand accounts about prior uses of the site are taken into account. The next step is to investigate the site on the ground. If a site had prior uses in the past, maybe as a dump, for example, sampling might need to take place of that area. If the site was a prior gas station, there may be tanks in the ground that held fuel. Sampling of that area would determine if any fuel remained in the soil or the groundwater. The third step would be to select a remediation method that would remove whatever hazardous materials are found at that site. After cleanup takes place and another round of sampling occurs to assure that there are no more remaining hazardous materials, the site is then considered remediated and would be open to be reused, knowing that no more health concerns remain. So what does brownfield redevelopment look like in a city? This is obviously downtown Ashland. It actually isn't, but for the purpose of this slide, that's what we're going to consider it. So what you see on the picture on the right is an abandoned landfill or dump right next to these railroad tracks. It seems to be abandoned and not being in use. There's metals, plastics, any other discarded items, and whatever associated chemicals come along with that, probably leaking into the ground. So what would happen at this site is the soil, surface water, and groundwater would be tested for hazardous materials. The site would be cleaned up and then retested again to ensure that these hazardous chemicals are no longer present. The site would be filled in, grass would be planted, and then obviously on the bottom there, you have yourself a park. The reservation, on the other hand, is mostly forested and mostly uninhabited land. So this was my very poor attempt at humor in a PowerPoint. The top picture there is from March of 2016, and the bottom one is from October of this last year, 2020. It just so happened that I went to, which I'll get to in a moment, this is the former area of where the fire hall used to be. I just so happened to get there after a rainy day, so it looks a little ugly, but sometimes the process isn't really that pretty. So back in 2016, there was a storage tank in the fire hall lawn that was run over, leading to fuel being spilled onto the front lawn. You can actually see the sheen on the water there on the top picture. After about 700 gallons of this water and fuel mixture was pumped out, the soil was carried away and the tank was removed from the ground. Sampling took place to determine if there was any remaining fuel. When the site was found that no more fuel remained in the soil, this site would then be considered to be remediated and could be used for a new purpose. This is one of the three types of brownfields we have on the reservation, that being these underground storage tanks. The second type of brownfield that we would have on the reservation are what we call spill sites. So this picture is from the actual wreckage of the Enbridge helicopter that went down in 2018. When this helicopter crashed, it released jet fuels, oils, and other fluids into the environment. Now, as most of you probably know, most of the stretch of the pipeline that runs through the reservation is in the middle of the woods. So bioremediation was what was chosen as the method to clean this site. What that consists of is adding soil amendments to the ground to increase or encourage microbial activity. What happens is that these microbes in the soil basically use the contaminants as a food source, leaving behind less chemical things like CO2. So this bioremediation that occurred consisted of digging up and turning over the soil and adding these amendments in the summers of 2019 and 2020. So this last round of soil turning that took place, which is the picture on the right, hopefully showing up, was from September 23rd of this last year. So the soil was turned over, the amendments were added, and then you can see that the site was covered in straw. In October of 2020, samples were taken from the soil, which showed that the fuels that were present after the crash still were present, but not to a level that our standards deemed to be hazardous going forward. But the department is still looking at determining if further remedial action is needed at the site going forward. Going on to our third set of brownfields on the reservation, these next two slides, I apologize, there's going to be a lot of text and a lot of history, but follow along with me if you will. So the paper mill that used to be in Ashland was operated by many larger corporations under many different names, and they dumped what we call sludge onto lands within the reservation boundary in the mid to late 60s until approximately 1979. And the sludge material that they dumped is made up of chemicals that are used to basically strip ink out of recycled paper so that that paper can then be printed on again. The three sites on our reservation are what we call County A Road, Government Road, and Verlin Clark. So these sites back in 2020, about 51 weeks to today, were given the designation of NFRAP, which we'll get to in a moment. So just a little bit more background history about these sites. Complaints were made in the late 70s regarding this sludge material that was being dumped out onto the reservation. Getting on the roadways, deer were consuming this waste material, and there were obviously concerns about our drinking water. Edith Leoso, our TIPO, who I saw is on the call, told me stories numerous times about this material being trucked from Ashland onto the res and blowing out the back of the trucks in transit, and it looked like it was basically snowing in the middle of summer. And only after the tribe demanded it, these trucks were covered when in transit. In the 1980s and 90s, samples were taken of the soil, and homeowners' wells in the Diaperville community were tested for what we call VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, heavy metals, and the EPA's priority pollutants. Again, in the 2000s and 2010s, various testing took place for these same VOCs, metals, and PCBs in the soil, sediment, and groundwater. So going back to this NFRAP, what is it? Well, it is an acronym. It means no further remedial action planned. And what that means is it's a designation given to brownfield sites by the EPA who are interested on going on a list on what's called the National Priorities List. What that means is that these sites can pull from a greater fund of money set aside by the federal government to clean up sites if, for example, a tribe or a small town doesn't have the means to clean up the site themselves. So this can be a good thing if the designation takes place after proper remediation steps took place, as in there are no longer concerns about the site. However, the designation can be a bad thing if there are still concerns about these areas from people who live in the community. So again, this was only a year, almost to the day, that the EPA basically told us on the 3 sludge sites that we have, you know, we don't have to worry about them anymore, or we're not going to help you going forward. So that brings us to today, and talking about PFAS substances, or polyfluoroalkyl substances. So what these are chemicals that are man-made and they persist in the environment for longer than any 1, 2, or even more generations. These chemicals come from factories and other places of industry and are often found in paper products such as to-go boxes or pizza boxes. They're found in stain repellents, and research is also being done into products like Teflon, which a lot of people still use in cooking or bakeware. Studies have never really been done in the past on how these PFAS chemicals affect the human body or how long they truly persist in the environment. And so this press release was from, I believe, last Monday, February 22nd, which was basically the EPA's way of saying they're going to take these PFAS chemicals as a priority going forward and address their prevalence in our drinking water and how that's going to affect human and environmental health going forward. So as far as our sludge sites are concerned, we did receive that NFRAP designation last year from the EPA, but we would like to look at getting these sludge sites tested for any of these PFAS chemicals that may be present, as they were never addressed in the testing that occurred in the past. So this slide is just a map taken off the public record. The public record for brownfields can be found on the website. All the information can be found on the website, as well as what Suzi's going to discuss next. If you look on the west side of the map, the 3 sludge sites are the furthest west on there. You can see the helicopter crash site is that bottom right star on the east side. And so we currently have 7 listed brownfield sites on the reservation. So all of these sites are either in the stage of monitoring or remediation, and some, like the sludge sites, we are planning on getting resampled very soon. Also, we had 2 parcels back in October of 2020 that were related to the sludge sites that had initial site assessments done that they determined were not in relation to the same sludge dumping activities of our 3 known sludge sites. So that's a good thing going forward. So obviously, maintenance of the public record is going to be important. Discovery and investigation of new sites, such as the parcels we just had assessed back in October, and monitoring and remediation of current sites like the Enbridge helicopter crash is still going to go on. As of this time, we are working with the US EPA to formalize and finalize what we're calling an emergency identification and response training. This is going to be for any sort of disaster or emergency that could occur on the reservation, anything from an oil spill to a truck that turns over on Highway 2. And it's not only going to be a natural resources effort, but hopefully we can get tribal council and tribal department heads involved as well. And obviously I have to put that any new information on potential sites where hazardous substances may have been, or you know that an activity is occurring, is always appreciated, and you can always reach out to me. So thank you very much. Like I said, I put this slide here, but I think we can skip it for now as far as questions. If you have any in the meantime, while Suzi is presenting, please feel free to put them in the chat and we can discuss them at the end. So thank you very much.
Suzi, I just made you the presenter.
Okay, great, thank you. Bonjour, I'm Suzi Smith, the GIS specialist in the Mashkiiziibii Natural Resources Department. So I'm going to go over first what is GIS, what does GIS do, and then we'll get to look at some cool maps and applications. So first of all, what is GIS? Well, it's an acronym that has two different meanings. First is that it refers to a system of the data and databases for storing information related to location. The system also includes any software, hardware, and other gadgets involved in that process. And also GIS refers to geographic information science, which is applying geographic information to create solutions and products such as maps and models of real-world scenarios. And the graphic on the right displays some of the types of map layers that we use in natural resources quite frequently. So there are the typical streams, land use, soils, elevation, things like geology. And then we also look quite a bit at cultural and political boundaries, going from the present time back to historic plats and air photos. Okay. So what does GIS do? Mainly it provides geographic context, and GIS and mapping also provides services and technology to Mashkiiziibii Natural Resources and Bed River Tribe for GIS and GPS training and data management for the various programs in the department. I also work a lot on data organization and documentation, as well as creating online, interactive, and printed or digital maps. So how old is GIS? Well, I think the answer to that has two parts. So Bad River Tribe has maintained a computer-based GIS system since about 1989, but Anishinaabe culture generally is very place-based, meaning language and customs are really based on the location where they take place. So I would argue that GIS as a concept is as old as time immemorial. And on the right is a traditional Ojibwe-Moan place names map of the sloughs. So here's an example of what I like to call old school GIS. So it's an image in three parts, three different ways of looking at a map. The top image is a pictograph map of an Ojibwe migration story from Midewiwin sacred scrolls that were originally drawn on birch bark. I believe this depicts the migration from the East Coast to the Great Lakes and even beyond and west of the Great Lakes. The middle image are the geographic places corresponding to the imagery from the top, as explained by James Redsky to the author of the publication back in 1969. And each of those points on the map corresponds to a part of the story that's depicted in the top section. And then in the bottom section of this figure are the geographic places from the Northern Great Lakes section of the scroll. And this image came from the Sacred Scrolls of the Southern Ojibwe by Selwyn Dewdney, published in 1975. But the scrolls themselves are much older. Here's another example of OG GIS. This one is another pictograph, and it's a story map that was drawn in 1888 by an Ojibwe person from oral history of a 1797 battle with the Dakota west of Mille Lacs. And in the story, he described the chief's lodge, elder women's lodges. Apparently, they refused to leave the vicinity of the battle, as they stayed there for quite some time. And then H, I, and J are the game that were hunted in the area, namely deer, grouse, and turtle. And then K represents the fact that they hunted along streams and lakes from the canoe. And while this looks, like a sketch, it also corresponds to very specific places and events. And today in modern times, we have something called story maps, which I won't show here because of issues with internet connectivity. sharing things through GoToMeeting, but story maps are a way of telling stories through maps using multimedia and imagery. But I see this example as another type of story map equivalent to what people are making today using modern technology. And this image comes from a book called Another America by Mark Warhouse, 1997. And I have copies of both of these publications that I showed maps from. So if anyone wants to take a closer look at these and other examples, feel free to stop by the office sometime when we're back up and running again and check them out, because there are a lot of cool old maps in those. Here's the final example I will show you of old school GIS. This is another, actually no, sorry, there's one more after this, but this is a bird's eye view of Odana, and it was originally drawn by Joseph Green sometime in the late 1800s. And it was copied from the Smithsonian Institute and donated to the tribe by Linda Bristol. And again, this is a picture and it's of an oblique view of the area, but you can tell where the White River and the Bad River confluence here just on the edge of town. And then up to the north is the Kakagan and its confluence with Bear Trap Creek. And there are various important places depicted on the map that were chosen by the artist and map maker of the time. From this, we can learn that at the time there were both wigwams and houses present on the landscape, and people would often travel the Bad River by canoe back in those days. So this is a really cool map that I have hanging above my computer to remind me that GIS isn't just tied to the modern technology, it stretches much further back in time and place. Here's another example of a map that we have that's very old. It's a drawing from 1899 of a survey of the Bad River Kakagan sloughs. Clearly it was hand drawn, and what we learn from it about the natural resources are approximate extents of rice fields up by Kakagan Slough, cranberry fields to the south. And another note that I find interesting is the map maker of this particular map thought it was important to include a note on frogs. So this map has been scanned in pieces and digitized, and digitization is a process by which map images are pinned to real-world locations for mapping. So now that this particular piece has been digitized, we can map these individual features up in the sloughs and compare them to modern times and think about what they mean for the future. So now we'll go into some modern applications of GIS. The first example here is mapping of non-local beings. On the left in purple is a map from 2017 of areas that were mapped for purple loosestrife, and then comparing that to areas that were treated for purple loosestrife up by Kakagan Slough. And then the map on the right is on the next slide, bigger, is a summary of all of the work that's been done in the sloughs to control invasive species between 2012 and 2019. So we can see the various species that were targeted and use this to plan for the future. Another frequently used application of modern GIS is in project reviews. So this example was the wetland mapping that was done for some projects that have been proposed around the admin building. And this map was created with GPS data. So that's another service provided by GIS and mapping, is that I help program managers get information from the field and transfer it onto useful maps that we use to make decisions. Another application is in watershed modeling and monitoring. So on the left is a map of the sub-watersheds within Bad River watershed. And that is useful in planning out where monitoring sites are located as well as understanding some of the parameters that we're getting from those sites. So on the right is the map of our nutrient sites, core sites, and supplemental sites that was made this past year. Another application of modern GIS is in making interactive web maps. This is our only web map that we're currently hosting on Mashkiiziibii Natural Resources page. It's depicting Bad River water quality designations, and it also shows where wild rice waters are located for regulatory purposes. And you can click through the map and look at pop-ups that give various information. The example here is Bad River Slough. You can see that the size in acres is 270.28 acres approximately, and that it is in fact a designated wild rice water. Another really cool application of modern GIS is LiDAR. So LiDAR is similar to radar, except instead of radio waves, it uses pulses of light to detect objects in space and places them into a GIS system. So how this works in a nutshell is an aircraft or a ground station emits lasers and pulses of light towards the object that it's sensing, and each of those pulses of light eventually bounces from the surface and goes back to the plane, where sophisticated devices interpret that into a GPS location. So each of those pulses of light is called a return, and if you look at all of the returns at once, it becomes what is called a point cloud, and this is the area that we were looking at with the Joseph Green map in Old Odena near the powwow grounds. And the image on the top is the point cloud, and you can see a very faint distinction in color between the trees and treetops, and then a light blue color for the ground surface and some shrubs. And then if you look at the very last return of the laser pulse, that gives you the bare earth digital elevation model, which is a surface of the ground that is being modeled in the GIS. And looking at that, it gives a very high resolution picture of the topography in an area. So in the powwow grounds, there's an old stream bed connected to the Kakagan. And you can also see on the left side, former Minoman fields. And on the right, you can see grooves where there used to be plowed fields. And there are many, many applications of looking at the earth in this way. We model flow of water over landscapes to understand water resources issues. We also look at in natural resources and tribal historic preservation office, potential burial grounds and other features on the surface. So those are just a few of the applications of GIS. I also have several resources online on the GIS and mapping webpage that you can look at to review, and you can reach out to contact me anytime if you have any questions. Now we're going to go into the prize drawings, but I encourage everyone on the call to tune in next week. Next Tuesday from 2 to 3, we're going to have fisheries present. And we also had Jacob Rodney here, and the air quality program was also going to present. And that would be Nathan Kilger. So big much for joining us, and we'll do some last tidbits to get ready for the prize drawing.
Yep, so this is just the roll call, and then we'll have the Q&A, like 10 minutes for Q&A after we do this roll call. And during the Q&A, that will give us time to actually do the drawing and announce the winners right at the end of the hour. I currently do not see anybody new on the call since our first, or on the meeting since our first roll call, but If you are on the phone and you are new since the first roll call that we did about 10 minutes into the meeting, please unmute yourself and let me know. Otherwise, if there's anybody that is logged in via their computer that hasn't provided me their contact information yet, please do so that I can include you in the different prize drawings. And so we can go on to the Q&A now. Anybody who has some questions for either Suzi or Andrew, I don't think we got any in the chat, at least that I see, so please feel free to unmute yourself and ask some questions.
And these are the prizes for today.
There's just one more prize that wasn't listed, and it's a set of, where are those things called? Yak tracks, like the grips that go on the bottom of boots too.
Hey, this is Naomi. I see we got one question in the chat. Looks like it's a question for Andrew. Andrew, does the designation as a former brownfield site ever expire or go back to a pre-brownfield status?
I see that. Thank you. So our brownfield sites, for example, we had one site that was a spill that was considered a spill site. We had the underground storage tanks, then we had our spill sites and our sludge sites. We had an overturned truck that released diesel fuel onto the side of the road, and that same process that happened with the fire hall. All of that oil and water mixture had to be pumped out, as well as excavating the soil. As far as the designation of a site, these companies, or I guess the group that causes the spill, can request closure of a site. As far as if we are listing it on the public record, that site that I'm talking about, the spill on Highway 2, was actually taken off of our public record. It's still listed there, kind of as a side note, but the goal is basically to get these sites back to as near to, I should say, pre-release conditions as possible. So, it's never likely going to be perfectly pristine, but if we can get it back to as close as possible instead of just letting it go, getting worse and worse down the road, that's the goal of what we're trying to do with all our sites. And I see I have another one related to that question. So that was actually before I started. I believe the company ended up paying for all of the removal of those hazardous materials from that spill that I was talking about, to answer Beth's question.
Yeah, Andrew, I believe that's correct when it comes to that Highway 2 diesel release. Maybe one thing just to add on here, do you want to mention the Chapter 380 at all?
And I guess I don't really have a short version that's digestible, but so we have a list of codes the tribe does. So without rambling too much, it goes through who is at fault for any release of hazardous substances, how we're going to go ahead and get the money to clean it up, and then if they're at fault, they're obviously the ones that pay for it. And then going forward, as far as the remediation, like the cleanup of the site is concerned, and doing the testing to get it back to that pre-release state, that would also be, we would be able to charge them for those sampling costs as well. So if it's not, it's up to whoever spills or releases the chemicals to cover the cost for remediating.
Andrew, I got a question for you. The site that's
Cool.
on County A, it's a flood site from the American Can, James River, or whoever else they decided to go under.
Yeah.
Is that site considered a Brownsfield site still, or is that on the classification as there's nothing else that can be done with it?
As of whenever March, I think it actually might have been like the 11th of last year. As far as the EPA is concerned, any of our three main sludge sites, that County A, Government Road, which I believe was capped, I don't know when it was capped off, they put clay over the top so none of the contaminants could migrate from the site. And then that Verlin Clark site, the EPA has basically told us that there is nothing, and I'm trying to be political in my response to you, there's nothing they're going to do as far as help us out anymore regarding the sludge that is there and the sampling that they've done. They basically checked all their boxes saying we did what was available to us at the time as far as seeing if these contaminants are bad enough at those areas. The reason I brought up those PFAS chemicals is that's such a new thing that the EPA, Wisconsin DNR, they just put out their own press release, I believe in December, about these chemicals that we might have had. I know Verlin Clark and County A, they've had 3 or 4 sets of sampling each, but if they're not sampling for these chemicals that no one ever looked at, they might have been there the whole time. So it's kind of like leaving it on the list as far as a brownfield and then allowing ourselves to open the door for communication back with them again, if that makes sense in a longer response than you probably wanted.
No, that's very good. I appreciate that. Just because it's, as far as my knowledge goes and what I understand, that's still leaking into our groundwater, causing contamination currently. And then from what I gathered from previous stuff that was put out, that would happen for like the next 50 years or so. Is that correct?
And if you think it's been going on since even say, 1980 till now, that's 41 years. And if just because they looked for 3 chemicals doesn't mean that the 4th one might have been there the whole time, and that could be the one that's causing the problem. So it's just one more step to take that I think is fair. Instead of just agreeing with them saying these sites are now, just up to us, like, well, no, there's some more we can do there.
I appreciate it, Andrew. Thanks. Well, for information, they capped that one out on government in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s is when that was capped on government.
Okay, I didn't want to get too in depth on the what was done at each site. I felt there was already too much information that people probably wanted me to gloss over.
Oh, I hear ya.
And Andrew, you have another question that came in the chat of if that bioremediation uses fungi.
I think there's actually a whole other type of remediation as far as using fungi, like to decontaminate a landscape. So to be frank, at that situation, I don't think that was the goal. It might be occurring just naturally, but the bioremediation out at the helicopter site was very much just get the soil to a condition where these microorganisms could, it is a cleanup process, but it is one that takes, a long time. I guess arguably 2 years or possibly more, depending on where we want to go from here. But I think using fungi as the main source is its own type of remediation.
It looks like we have another comment that says, thank you for both your presentations. The commenter learned a lot and especially enjoyed seeing the examples of OGGIS, which were amazing. So if there aren't any more questions or comments for the presenters, I think we can move on to the door prize drawings. Suzi, could you just confirm for me the question I asked in the chat? And then so everybody interested in the door prize drawings, please stay on the line, and I'll share my screen to show you that prize wheel in a second.
Yes. Hello, this is Jay.
Go ahead, Jay.
Hi. I was wondering, did you say that those sites are being declassified? The brownfield sites.
No, Jay, not declassified. Well, I guess depending on the sense of the word, kinda. They've basically been given a designation as far as brownfield sites are concerned, that larger fund of money that the federal government puts aside to clean them up, we are no longer able to pull from. So any of the work that we have going forward, as far as if we wanted to do some large scale remediation, would be up to us and us alone, or if we got obviously grants from other grants to do that cleanup work. So that's what I meant by that designation.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering what you meant by that. Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. We're going to draw for 5 door prizes. Please don't leave if you want to be entered for a door prize. You must be present to win. Those who have left can still be entered into the grand prize drawing if we have their contact information, but hang on a second and I'll share my screen. Okay, so we have 5 eligible people left on the call for the door prize drawing. So the first one we'll do will be for the puddle-proof tote. So it looks like Beth won the puddle-proof tote. So Beth will send you an email about that. The next prize drawing is for the yak tracks. So it looks like Penny won the yak tracks. Penny will get a hold of you for those. Next one is the chromer. and Lucy Coivistal on the Cromer. Then we have the Life Straw. It looks like Lucy did win the Life Straw as well. And then the last door prize we have today is the lantern. Hang on. And it looks like Melanie Connors won the lantern. So thank you everyone for participating. We hope to see you at future sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Fish.
Thanks, guys. Very good presentation. I liked it.
I agree. Great job, guys.